So today we're talking about dividends. Dividends are some of the investors' favorite investments just because even if the stock market falls, you still get paid by dividends. So let's talk a little bit about dividends. So welcome back to my channel. This is Claudia, and today we're talking about dividends, what dividends are and how they get paid out. So stay tuned. A dividend is a payment that received from a company through their profits. So a company can either reinvest the profits to grow the company, or they can distribute dividends. And dividends also is just a nice way to appreciate the shareholders. So there's many companies, so many of them that distribute dividends. It's like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, J&J, Pfizer. So a ton of companies distribute dividends. So mature companies have been around for a while and have strong cash flow, are probably more likely to distribute dividends. Many investors seek income with dividends. Companies pay dividends quarterly, twice a year, or annually. So a company that is not obligated to pay dividends and can stop or reduce the dividends at any time, as we've seen during the 2020. Like Boeing was one of them that had to cut their dividends because of the pandemic. So you must be a shareholder before the dividend record date to receive dividends. There's a cut prior to the dividends called the X Dividend date. If you buy your stock at or after the X dividend dates, you might not receive your dividends. So the stock must be purchased at least a couple of days before the record date. The time of the record date varies. Usually it varies between 1 and 6 weeks. You can also opt for a dividends reinvestment plan, like TRIP. So the dividend reinvestment plan automatically reinvests the dividends into the asset. So that allows the investor to accumulate their holdings and compound over time. So in the last 100 years, there've been a lot of up and downs in the stock market. However, dividends were pretty steady. So yeah, a company doesn't have to pay dividends. It's free will, and they can cut their dividends at any time. So if they feel like they're not having any revenue, like when we had our quarantine, all these companies didn't have any revenue. And of course, companies like Boeing had to cut their dividends, and a lot of others had to too. I remember Occidental Petroleum had a nice dividends, and Warren Buffett was buying that prior to the pandemic. And I remember that they cut dividends, but I didn't cut it for him because they needed him. And he won't have shares of any companies, I don't think, without having some sort of dividends. And so they kept their dividends for him to keep holding those shares. So, and by now he bought more and more shares. He was a little bit he was a little bit thinking over when they were asking and interviewing him about Occidental Petroleum during that time. But of course, so many companies were just down during that time because nobody made revenue. But yeah, they can cut dividends at any time, cut them out or cut them down. AT&T cut down. They had a 7-something% dividends, and it's down to 5.2 or something like that. And so a lot of people had to do that. But in overall, many kept their dividends, and that kept people invested. A dividend yield is the sum of the last 4 dividends divided by the price of a stock multiplied by 100. So for an example, a $30 stock has been paid a dividend of 78 cents divided by 30 and multiplied by 100 shares. That means the stock has a dividend yield of 2.6%. So if a stock has a dividend yield of 2.6%, so investor might come in and to buy a bond. However, the bond only, for an example, has a 1.5% return. and there is a dividend stock that has 2.6% return, it's more likely that the investor goes for the dividend stock and not so much for the bond. Also, when you think about it, some of these companies have been around for a long, long time. I'm sure you've heard an aristocrat, a dividend aristocrat. A dividend aristocrat is a company that has maintained and increased their dividends for 25 years, for the last 25 years. That makes them an aristocrat. Now there's something else which is called the king, the dividend king. So the dividend king has been around for 50 years, increased and paid dividends for 50 years. So that's pretty amazing. And I believe Coca-Cola is one of them. But yeah, there's also aristocrat ETFs and NOBL. And so you can invest into an ETF that pays dividends. And then, of course, you can just accumulate shares through dividend investing. So I hope this explained dividends a little bit. I need to add also that when you get paid a dividends at the end of the year, even if you haven't gotten anything paid out, and you just reinvest it, you still have to pay taxes on those dividends because it is an income. So you don't have to pay taxes right away until you sell on your long-term investments or even in your short-term capital gains. You know, if you're selling your short-term capital gains, obviously you have to pay taxes. Long-term, you only pay taxes when you sell them. But on dividends, even if you use a dividend investment plan, you still have to pay your taxes on it. So anyway, I hope that helps. And short video, thank you so much for coming back to my YouTube channel. And I hope you enjoyed this. Please put a like and a subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.